Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. It is here, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've all been waiting for this MLS season to be over. It is finally here. We don't have to think about it anymore. Of course, we'll still be here to talk about it and think about it. I'm here with Clay Trainum and Valer Shabilla. Uh, what weekend, y'all? Anybody watch Nashville soccer over the weekend?
I did. I don't think y'all did. Did you?
I did
Okay.
not.
I watched the
Okay.
highlights.
This
All
is
right.
the first
Well,
this is the first time I've ever felt confident in being like, you know what? I think I could still do this show without watching the game itself. And that's exactly what I did this weekend.
that is fair. I will say the weekend I had it was MLS decision day, obviously. So I had my little like tablet thing. I had the big screen and I had my laptop. I used my laptop to like type stuff and like post stuff throughout the match. So I had two screens to choose from. And the first half, I did the big screen. My big TV was Nashville, Chicago, and my little tablet. I put MLS 360 to kind of keep up with everything. So I posted that on Twitter, not really thinking about it. And Ben Wright like replied, he was like, "That is like proper sicko behavior to be like Nashville, Chicago on the big screen." While like, so second half, I did realize that since you guys didn't see, the first half was even worse than the second half because nothing happened for the most part. Like Chicago had like one shot, Nashville had like two, and that was that. And so the second half, I switched it around and put Nashville on the low screen and the big stuff on the big screen. But I found it very hard to keep up, and I was like, because like my first instinct is to look at the big screen, and like I had to like still keep up with Nashville's game, and then I just ended up muting both screens and on my laptop doing the live watch along with the Soccer Wise folks, who are David Goss and Tom Bogert. Huge shout out to them. They do great work, and that's what I. So I end up listening to some people, watching two different streams, and talking about the Nashville SC game. So all in all, decision day. That's I guess what happens. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that story, but that's what that was my behavior during that
Blair
time.
was just giving us a recount of the first half of the game just by telling us that story specifically, just how
I
that went.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I just want to draw attention to something. So in 2019, when I was approached by Stephen and Valaire about being on this show, the reason that they wanted me on this show, in addition to the historic thing, is because neither of them had really watched a whole lot of MLS, and I'd been watching MLS for a long time. And I would never in my life do what Valaire did at any point in my time as a fan in my life would ever do that.
I really
So,
did not know where you were going with that.
I
Like
had
I was,
no
I
idea.
was sitting here at the edge of my seat, like, oh, where are we going with this, guys?
and so I would, I used to be like diehard, super into it. I would never do that. So, congrats, I guess, Valaire,
I don't
on the
know if
way
that's
to
the right
spend your
word.
Saturday. Did anybody witness this setup for you on Saturday evening? If so, were they very judgmental of you? Because I would have been.
No, other than the picture I posted on Twitter, I didn't interact with a single human Saturday night. So
Sounds like
no.
it. Sounds like it.
So no. I also watched the Western Conference teams right after that, but that was just one screen. I figured MLS 360 got me covered, which was a very, very exciting sort of end to the Western Conference games. But we don't need to get into all of that. Other than that, I really didn't do a whole lot of my weekend. I don't even remember what I did, but yeah, I guess played video games and watched the Titans lose again, which is just like a weekly thing now.
It's funny because I I mean, I used to be like a real diehard Titans fan. I had a Titans license plate, like I was really into it. Then the whole stadium thing happens, and suddenly I don't really care as much. But I still root for them. And you know what? The Titans had absolutely no effect on my weekend. I'd given up on them already. And because of that, I had a pretty great sports weekend. So before the show started, Steve and I were talking about the mighty, mighty, mighty Indiana Hoosiers who beat a ranked team by 49 points. That'd be the losingest program in the history of college football, beat a ranked team by 49 points with the first year head coach. And the Dodgers, you know, are going to the World Series again. Pretty cool. And Ball State played in town and they beat the spread. So like there's a lot going on. It was pretty good. I didn't watch the Nashville game because Ball State was playing Vanderbilt in town and it was tied going into the fourth quarter. So we had a good time with a lot of Ball State fans, a lot of people locally here who went to Ball State. Found out there's 1,300 of us in the Nashville area, including Blaine Bishop. So shouts to Blaine.
And do
And
you
then
know all 1,300 people by
I
name?
know I know a few of them. And
I know
then
Blaine Bishop and Clay Trainum, so that's at least two.
and then and then of course the very very rare Clay Trainum 6-pointer on Saturday where you get 3 points from Everton and 3 points from Nashville on the same day. It's a rare occurrence. It's happened very few times in the in the history of NSC. And so pretty good all around sports weekend, which doesn't happen for me an awful lot considering that the teams I root for are Nashville and Indiana and Everton.
Yeah, not a great teams to have in your repertoire. I don't even want to talk about my sports weekend. I had an awful sports weekend. So
Did you have a good weekend away from sports?
I did have a good weekend away from sports.
There
Thank you
you
very much
go.
for asking. Actually, Saturday night, instead of watching Nashville SC, I went to my first like EDM like concert. Like that was like an actual like festival type of thing. And it was fun. I get why there's a lot of similarities in the communities between like soccer folks being very welcoming and stuff like that, and like why people like going to festivals and stuff. So it was a good time. I really appreciated it. And then I did nothing Sunday. I did not care to do a dang thing. But yeah, it was really funny though to be a part of DC United here in town. Just they had everything ready to go, everything falling in their favor. All they had to do is win at home and beat Charlotte. And
Or tie.
or
Or tie.
tie, and they were absolutely through. Tickets were selling for like $80. Like that was the cheapest one. Like finally, there was some soccer excitement here for DC United, and they fumbled the bag 3-0 at home to Charlotte.
Yeah, that was tough. That was tough for the boys there,
I mean,
especially with
classic DC
Benteke.
sports. I mean, that's a classic DC sports.
Ugh. But I mean, everybody, y'all, the Nashville SC season is over. Again, we still have MLS playoffs, all that type of stuff. Nashville does go out, in a good form. I think any going away anywhere and winning is still, something to be happy about. We're not going to get into the game. They all got an assist, so that's cool. Sam Surridge should just dribble six people all the time and score a goal because that would just make life a lot easier for us. And us as fans. But I mean, with that being said,
Don't go past this without mentioning Alex Muyl got an incredible goal by deflecting over two defenders, which was pretty nice.
So I would like to note that, you know, Nashville, of course, does the double over Chicago, which is not new. Nashville has typically done very well against Chicago. And, Nashville has lost to Chicago, I think, once. But are we prepared to call it the curse of Gutman? Because
Yes.
Nashville doesn't typically do well against the teams at the bottom of the table. Even when Nashville's good, they get results that make no sense against the teams towards the bottom of the table. But for whatever reason, they can just take care of Chicago seemingly at will whenever they need to.
I'm fine with it. I'll take it. At least it's something. I mean, we were talking about it before we started recording that we could go to Chicago and get a double over, but we can't beat San Jose at home, which is always a good time. So, but I mean, look, season's over. Obviously, the season did not end the way that we wanted it to, in totality. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in the second segment when we kind of grade everybody, um, and do our nice little end of year grades. Um, but like, is there any sort of optimism coming into the off season? Are you just glad it's done? Where are you kind of at when it comes to just, I don't know, end of season vibes?
I think for Nashville SC fans, I, I think there's a moment right now where you don't know how good you had it, type of thing. And I don't think anybody was looking at those previous 4 seasons and saying, "Wow, this is the greatest thing we've witnessed." But I felt like there was a lot of tension between fans and the club in terms of decisions or with the coaching staff, especially Gary Smith. And this season kind of makes you think that yes, it can be worse. It can be much worse. And other than maybe the 2020 season, which was I think fairly positive ending, even though Nashville was eliminated from the playoffs, every season ended in a sort of this got to be the worst thing ever to happen, and we should look to change things next season. And that was kind of how it felt from the fans' perspective. But then this season comes through and I think puts it all in perspective of like, well, maybe it wasn't all that bad. Maybe making the playoffs is not necessarily an easy thing to do, even though 62% of the teams make it in MLS. That said, I think the frustration is not gonna cause fans to all of a sudden realize that they had it good with the with the regime beforehand. I don't think anybody's gonna say that. I think they're gonna look at what's coming ahead because that's the nature of sports and the nature of a failing team or a losing team like Nashville SC. So to come ahead, I think there are some positives, but I would be lying I'd be lying if I said I look at this team and say, wow, they're going to really leave a mark in 2025. I think they can. I think there's a possibility there, but I think the work is cut out for them, especially from Mike Jacobs and that staff there to create an environment, to recreate an environment that is winning, to kind of get over this hump year. I just don't know. I just don't know if that's possible next season, in all honesty. And I think um that's kind of what's keeping the optimism from rolling in for 2025.
I I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess. Uh, I don't I don't tend to think that there's a lot of year over year, like especially for teams like Nashville. Like, there's a clear tier system within MLS. Like you have this group of teams, which is typically better than most teams year in and year out. Nashville's not in that group, but they've been just below it for the last few years. And I can't tell you how many times in this league over the years we've seen a team go worst to first or go from being mediocre to okay to really good the next year and vice versa, unfortunately. And so I don't tend to think of one year bleeding into the next as much as I would with other teams and with other leagues. And so I feel pretty good that, you know, the sort of main characters, like the big contracts that Nashville has, the guys that they want to be their best players, are pretty good players still, and guys that you can build around. And because of that, I think that the ceiling, the excuse me, the floor for this Nashville team is significantly higher than other teams that are not in the playoffs. But maybe the issue is how high is that ceiling? So I'm cautiously optimistic. There are some things to like from the last few months. There are some things that are big question marks from the last few months. And there's some real, roster construction questions and concerns that have to be answered in the next, you know, honestly, you say next few months, but really it's the next few weeks, like because it's almost November and then you'll get to the other side of December and camp start up January, February. So like you've really got a lot of stuff that's going to happen here in the next 5 or 6 weeks to really determine the future for this Nashville squad. But I wouldn't get too down. Like I said, I think that there are some pretty strong pillars that you can build around for next season. I think there are some questions long term, 2, 3 years down the line. But I think next year that they've got enough that they can build around and have a successful season, whatever that may mean.
Well, and I think that's the curious point for me, where you talk about even before the first year of MLS, we've had the same kind of, plan since the beginning of we are going to be a team that flies under the radar. We are not going to show our hand right away. We're gonna, do things like sign our DPs in summer, do all these like random roster things, and we're gonna do everything under the radar, and we're just gonna do our job, and we're gonna be fine no matter what. I don't think Nashville has the ability. I think that plan is just ruined. I don't think you have the ability to do that coming into this offseason. I don't think you have the ability to wait for these decisions to be made. I don't think you have the ability to not do some flashy things here in the offseason because it has been shown, even the past couple months, how where you're at in the table is affecting stadium performance. I mean, it looks like there isn't a wait list for season tickets anymore. It's one of those things where I'm very curious to see how everybody starts operating on the front end. Like I, I'm cautiously optimistic that it can get done, but until it's seen, we're going to be sitting here in the same state that we were, a month ago until some of these decisions and some of these changes have been made. And I think
Yeah, I
that's
think
kind of I feel.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's very valid because you look at Nashville coming into every single season knowing exactly how they're gonna play, knowing exactly who's gonna occupy what spot. Walker Zimmerman has been there, right? Dave Romney or Jack Miller was always there. Dan Lovitz, and more recently Shaq Moore, right? That's just like Joe Willis. That's the defense, right? And I know we'll talk about them next segment, but like going from that to like right now, if you tell me that Dan Levis got traded, I would not be surprised at all. Where last year or every single year of Nashville's existence, I would have been surprised. If you tell me Anibal Godoy option was declined and he went and signed somewhere else, I would not be surprised. Other than the three DPs, I think everything is in play because Nashville doesn't want to play in the same way they used to where coming into every single season so far, we've known exactly how Nashville wants to play under Gary Smith. Now Nashville is a completely different thing, and it's a completely different project, and that's why I guess Mike Jacobs kept calling it 2.0, Nashville 2.0. We're yet to see what Nashville 2.0 looks like, and you're right, Steven. They cannot wait until the summer to show us what Nashville 2.0 looks like, because if next season starts and the results are as bad as this season, Mike Jacobs' job should be questioned. I don't, I think that's a fair thing to say because it's a result-driven business, and if you can't get results, well, it's tough out there.
And the thing that is in line with that is that I think this is the first time where he's not going to have this back pocket way to get out of not making that signing in the winter. Like he's gotten a pretty long leash to be able to bring in someone in the summer instead of the winter. And there are some like pretty valid reasons for trying to make that happen. But he moves Alistair Johnston, but it takes too long to get Shaq Moore in. So he comes in the winter, or he comes in the summer instead of the winter. Surge, they're looking for the right guy. There's also all this stuff going on off-season wise. You've got stadium stuff in years past. You've got all of these different aspects out there, the Ake Loba situation for as reasons why they didn't make the big signing in the winter and instead waited till the summer. At this point, what are they going to say? There's no Champions League. There's no early start to the season. You have got every reason in the world to go out and make your splash in the winter. And that is what the job is. And so I think while he's had something that he could point to, that he could say why they held off on doing this, this is not in play this time because there are things that have to happen and happen quickly in order to build this roster back. And it is not something where you're going to go right into playing and you want to have like consistency in your roster and all this, whatever reasons they were giving in years past. So I think that this winter is a real big test. Can they get the big deal on the line in the time they need to do it instead of waiting off? Because we haven't really seen them do that.
Speaking of big tests, both Clay, Valera, and I had a big test at the beginning of the season, which is our annual prop bet episode. And now that the MLS season has closed out for Nashville, I guess we can kind of give an update and see who won there. I think I have an idea on who won. But Valera, do you want to provide us with that prop bet update?
Yeah, before I update everybody, I have been the unquestionable winner of this 4 years in a row, 4 years running. No one else on this podcast has won it. We did include Omari on this year's edition, so let's not forget about that. I want to put something up for discussion here really quickly. one person out of the four of us picked Inter Miami away as the first loss. Now, when this was picked, this was meant to be Inter Miami away in the MLS regular season. Nashville SC lost to Inter Miami away in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Another person has picked LAFC away as the first loss. LAFC away technically was the first MLS regular season loss. Inter Miami away was the first loss for CONCACAF Champions Cup. What are we counting here?
The first loss of the season.
Even though that match did not exist in the schedule when the pick was made.
I'm just saying we said the first loss of the season when we did it.
What did I put as the first loss? Did I pick Miami?
You picked DC away, which is neither here nor there. I don't think it matters. So okay, that's fair. I think I can get along with that. I just felt like it was weird that they picked a game that didn't even exist.
Hey, Valer, can I make a guess? Did you pick the LAFC as the first loss?
And of course I did. And Omari picked
somebody else that's about to win and beat you picked the other one?
Yes, Omari picked Inter Miami away, and I picked LAFC away, and it's fine. I think this is the right way to do it. I just wanted to ask and see. But yes, Omari wins this year's edition of the prop bets. Clay got 1 right, Steven got 0 right, I got 2 right, Omari got 3. So that's really 0? You got 0 like you always do. I don't think you've gotten a single prop bet. So we preview the season this way. I will go ahead and give. Yes, Clay, go ahead.
That's also not true.
No, the funny thing is Steven did get 1 right, but he made us not this season. In the first season, he specifically said how it would be scored, and he said you have to count it that way because he's a moron. And because of that, I think he put like 80 on it. Like if he would have just said it wasn't from a free kick, he would have won. He would have won going away in the first season.
Yes. So good job, Steven, there. You got 0 right. I did find this interesting. I kind of forgot about that. For the first to be traded from Nashville SC, you picked me to be traded, which I don't even know how that would be possible.
He was saying that you would start covering St. Louis.
Right, because I went to St. Louis once. Like, okay. First goal, you picked Taylor Washington, which honestly you're kind of close on that because he got an assist, I guess, but it wasn't the first goal by any means. And then I think you had leading scorer for the season who is not named Hani Mukhtar. You picked Shaq Moore. So I don't even want to. I don't want to go into the rest of your picks. This is ridiculous. I'm tired of you not taking this seriously. However, you do lose again this year. Clay, you continue to lose as well, but at least you're attempting to be better. I have 4 of these in my bag, so I'll give 1 to Omari, whatever, and then you guys still have 0s on yours.
I think this is the greatest part about it is we can make fun of my picks all day long, but I still have the same amount of wins year over year as Clay Trainham does. Just remember that.
That is unfortunate.
Here's the thing. This is way wrong because this is about an imaginary amount of money. And at the end of the day, Valer and I are at least walking out of here with an imaginary amount of money because we're at least getting some right every year.
That is true.
And you're
Clay, to be exact, you made $12 this year out of the 100. So that's better than 0.
Hey, technically, at the end of the day, if this was actual betting, we would be all negative, and that is all that matters in life.
Yeah, but Omari would be close to 50%. Anyway, Omari got the first red card of the season right with Joe Willis. Really smart pick. None of us had that. First hat trick of the season. Both Clay and I had Surridge, which was correct. And then both Omari and I got Surridge for leading goal scorer who's not named Hani Mukhtar. However, the decider, first loss, Omari had Inter Miami away.
Who did I take for that?
Who did you have? You had Boyd.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, nobody altered their herald dramatically, now that I know of, at least. So Steven had $37 on that. So for McNaughton to do it.
I was very confident in that one.
I think honestly, if McNaughton doesn't get hurt, Steven might win.
I'm agreed. I absolutely agreed. Look, we do have some other stuff to talk about though, when it comes to just kind of wrapping up the MLS season. We're gonna give some grades to the squad, plus just talk about what we're excited for when it comes to playoffs, and we're gonna do that next right here in Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at PharmaSoccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you did not know, we do have a Patreon. Even with the off season now ahead, we will be going full steam. So we would like you to join our Patreon. PharmaSoccer is only $5 a month. It gives us the ability to keep doing this show. We love doing it. We want to continue to be a part of this, for everybody. So yeah, check that out. We also have a website, pharmasoccer.com. So please make sure you do check that out as well. Be a part of what's going on when it comes to pharmaceutical soccer. That'd be great. Look, we have to. Do we do this? Do we grade this every year? Do we do this every year?
Yeah, I think we do it halfway through the season too sometimes. So
Cool. So what we're going to be doing today, as the season's wrapped up, is just kind of our end of season superlatives, where we are going to do our grades when it comes to defense, midfield, attacking, our grades for the season, all that fun type of stuff. Remember, like last week when I was talking about positivity and all of that? Yeah, all of that goes out the window for me now. I'm now just going to embrace this time. But yeah, we're gonna do this thing. So I don't know. Any words before we get into it, or do you just want to jump in?
let's jump in.
Jump in. All right, let's start with the goalkeeping and defense when it comes to Nashville SC for this season. I'll let Valer start off. Valer, what was your grade when it came to the defense and keeper for this season?
I gave him a D, and I think that is being a little generous. I think for the defense, there was a lot of there's a lot of injuries, so I don't want to like. I do want to preface that with saying that the injuries don't really factor in here because I'm just grading the people who were selected to play. There was also Walker Zimmerman going on international duty for the Olympics, and then there was just a lot of factors that kind of played into this grade, and I think the biggest thing that resulted in me giving them a D instead of any other grade is because just the drop from the most solid defense in the league pretty much to what we saw in 2024, which was very mistake prone, just unable to be organized, and just giving away goals that a veteran team should never be able to give away. And yes, I know Walker Zimmerman didn't start every game, but I don't want to harp too much on like Josh Bauer or Jack Mayer, but like Josh Bauer I thought had an all right season, but they also need to step up. Dan Lovitz is a veteran in this league. Shaq Moore is a World Cup player. These players also need to step up. And Joe Willis, who's been very solid, also had a couple of mistakes. So I think overall, the inability to focus and stay organized and really channel in what you are known for, which is being defensively sound, results in a grade like this for the defense and Joe Willis.
Play.
I'm going to be more positive than Steven, so I'm going to let Steven go first.
Cool. I'm gonna have a thought process when it comes to all of my grades, and you'll see the trend and type of pattern as I continue to give my grades. So as Valer stated, 61% of the teams make the playoffs, right? Is that what you said?
62, I think.
Cool. So normally a 62% would translate into right about a D minus, I believe. So Nashville would literally just need to have a D minus to make it into the playoffs in MLS. We didn't do that. Were there a couple positives that were throughout the season? Yes, absolutely. But we did not attain 62% in any of these grades that we're going to be going over. So for the defense and the keepers, I'm going to go with an F minus. Actually, I think this one I'm actually going to go F minus. I agree.
For clarification's sake, F minus is not a grade because F is failure, so you can't be like failure minus.
But I would say if there was any spot that did fail more than the other ones, I would go defense. Like I believe the defense literally just wrote their name on the Scantron and turned it in without filling in any of the bubbles. I feel like that's what the defense and keepers have done this year. Blair, you're right. It is one of the things where Walker Zimmerman was not in all the matches, but this was the year where you still have the people that needed to perform that didn't. You still had the veterans like Shaq Moore, like Dan Lovitz, that didn't perform. Jack Mayer didn't perform. You had these people that were brought in to do things specifically that just did not. It just wasn't there. And yeah, as a team that was built in one way, they didn't do their job, and that's why I'm giving the defense and keepers an F. Play.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think on some level there are some impressive things that did happen defensively this year, but maybe not necessarily on the field. And what I mean by that is that, as Valera talked about, as Steven talked about, there were a lot of injuries that did happen over the course of the season. There are guys missing to international duty. And I really think that one of the things we talked about before the season start was the depth of the defense. And you don't lose a starting center back as Nashville did with Lucas McNaughton and expect to have a good defensive performance in MLS. It's just not the way rosters are constructed. You also don't pay your third string center back 800,000, which is also what Nashville did. So there are some things to think about there, but on the other hand, like they were able to sustain major injuries and still get serviceable minutes. I think you could say, like, if you would have told us before the season started that Josh Bauer was going to get a contract extension sent his way, I think we would have thought that it was a really bad year for a lot of people. And it was a bad year, but I think he showed himself to be an MLS caliber, replacement level, sure, but caliber defender who can go in and you can win games with him at center back. And that is something that we saw. We saw some real depth at center back this year get results. Now they didn't get a lot of good results, to be fair, but we saw that they could play, and I don't think you could say that about a lot of center back groupings in MLS. I think there's some real questions about the fullbacks. I think some of the questions about the fullbacks have been there for years, and so I think that is barely serviceable the way that they've built up that position. I think you got some good minutes from Taylor Washington, but you also still had to use Alex Muyl in that role at times this year. You still had to play Daniel Lovitz in a couple weird spots over the year. But I think the depth is something that you can look at and feel pretty good about. But their performances you can't feel great about. And then on the other end of that, and this is like the other side of the spectrum because it is defense and keeper, I don't think we saw the depth at goalkeeper that we expected to see. And I think that that's a real big glaring issue because Joe Willis did make a lot of mistakes this year, mistakes that he hasn't been making. Is that related to not really having a good number two, someone who can come in and challenge for that starting role? I think we expected Joe Willis to get challenged for the starting keeper role this year, and it didn't happen. And that points to a lack of depth at keeper. When Joe was challenged in years past, well, I mean, really 1 year past, he really responded well to it. And I don't think that we saw that this year. So I'm a little bit worried about the keeper. I think Joe Willis is serviceable, but a serviceable keeper with no competition doesn't become a serviceable keeper anymore. Like they start to lose a little bit of their shine. So I'm giving a D. I think that's the maximum you can give because the defense was not good overall. But I think that there are some things that you can point to and say, like, if you put other teams in this situation with the amount of injuries, with the amount of international call-ups, they would have been even worse, which is like a really negative way of looking at it. But I do think that they're passing, but only barely.
And we move on from the defense to another area of the field, which would be the midfield. Very curious about how these are going to go.
Steven, go ahead and give your grade since we kind of know where this is going. So you go ahead and tell us what you think
want me
about
to do
the
mine
midfield.
first? Okay.
Yeah.
So when I say I was sticking with a pattern here, I'm going to go with an F for the midfield.
Right.
This is not an F minus. I don't think this was the fully detriment to the team, but I'm definitely going to go with an F here. I do think there were a couple positives when it comes to this team. I do think bringing in Jonathan Perez. I do think Patrick Yazbek was even a positive in some ways. And I do think Anunga had a really good season as well. And I don't necessarily know if I'd put Alex Maweel in this midfielder attacking. It's kind of weird, like where, there are some positives, but overall, the goal of that midfield specifically is to control the game.
I'm starting to think that when we do these grades, it should say defense, midfield, attack, wheel, and then get everything stacked.
Maweel gets his own grade.
Because he plays all three.
And it's always a B. There's just it never goes up or down. It's just always a B. You just get a B,
no matter what. But no, I mean the goal of the midfield is to control the game, and we didn't really have a ton of that going throughout. I think Godoy probably had one of the worst years of his career in Nashville. I mean, you have players like Sean Davis, who you're paying a lot of money to be on the bench. That's not helping out. There wasn't a lot of Drew Yearwood. We had a lot of high hopes for Drew Yearwood, but it did not seem to pan out in that way. Like, I don't necessarily it's weird just because of the fact there was so much changeover in the midfield. I don't really feel like there was a really good way to construct like a just good presence going forward throughout anybody. I think it started to build off when you had Anunga in these positions that are just, there was no really starting block. Like, I don't want Brian Anunga to be my good midfield starting block. I don't want that. So I think the midfield was put in a not great position. They were still terrible, so it is an F, but not as bad as the defense was.
And I do want to say that like the defensive performances are also affected by how the midfield plays and subsequently the rest of the team plays. So like let's keep that in mind. But for this specific exercise, we are taking those very specific moments and kind of focusing on each area of the field. And for me, the midfield, I gave him a D as well, just like the defense, where I thought it's a veteran group in a lot of ways. It's a group playing for something, trying to prove something. When you look at Drew Yearwood when he came into this team, this was his last year of his deal, and he was trying to prove enough to stay in Nashville SC. And I don't know if he did, honestly. When you look at Sean Davis, he has captained this team at times and been sort of that veteran presence of this team alongside Anibal Godoy. And I don't think either of them did enough. So when I look at this midfield on who took a step forward this year, who improved or who played better, other than Brian Anunga, I really don't have an answer. Matter of fact, I can probably give you who regressed more so than who stepped up. And Sejdic, I don't really want to, it's not his fault that he wasn't getting minutes, but when he got the minutes, he wasn't really doing much with it either. So like, there was just a lot of movement, like Steven said, and I think a lot of it is not what they can control in terms of the midfielders. However, there was stuff that they could control that I thought they could have done better. And I think if you ask them, they will tell you the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, before the season started, I think we probably all would have said the midfield is probably the deepest position group that Nashville has. Like, they clearly concentrated a lot of money in the midfield. And I think that there are some things that I gave him a C minus, so just only marginally more than what Blair gave. But like, and again, you look at it the same way you look at the defense. Major injuries played a huge role in the midfield, and I think that misallocation of resources shows the most in the midfield. I've got a list of like, what players are on salary wise next to my computer right here, and $2 million is tied up in Randall Leal and Sean Davis, guys that Randall Leal doesn't play due to injury. Sean Davis doesn't play, coach's decision for the most part. And then you take Boyd into account. You take injury to Yearwood into account. I actually think that Yearwood could play in this style that BJ Callahan wants to implement. I think he can be a very effective player, but not on the wages that he's on. But I think that's a really, before he went down, I was really starting to like the way that he was fitting into Nashville. And I think he would have fit in really well with the way that Nashville was starting to play. But all that said, like, I gave a C minus but I gave a C minus because I think that they are one of the brighter spots that Nashville has, not a lot of bright spots, but I also think they're the most disappointing group collectively. Not all due to stuff they did on the field. Some of it was injuries, some of it was like production based, but like there are some things to be a little bit excited about, like whatever Yazbek does. I mean, they made a signing in midfield. Yazbek looks like he'll be a starter going forward. Uh, I have stronger feelings about Sejdic than Valaire does, but I think like for 90,000, like he was a pretty good player who was effective for his price range. Along the same lines, like Todd Ryan Anunga shouldn't be a starter, but Todd Ryan Anunga is a success story in this Nashville squad. That was a guy who may have been fighting for his MLS future, and he became a starter by the end of the season, which says a lot about the people in front of that were in front of him, but also says a lot about the work that he did in the season. So I think I, I'm interested to see what happens now because there's a glut of players in that midfield that they're going to have to let go and see who they're bringing in, kind of see how that shapes out in this new system. But I think that there are some guys that you can look at and say that guy is going to be a player in this squad next year.
And this is another episode, but Drew Yearwood is out of contract. Annabelle
Right.
Godoy does have an option that is a club option. So there's some stuff that's out of Nashville's control, but also obviously some stuff that is in their control.
And we have the attack. We have the offense of Nashville SC, where we do have some grades as well to give for this. Definitely interesting year when it came to our offense. Do you guys want me to go first again, or do you guys want?
Yeah, go ahead. Because
Okay,
I'm very shocked with your grade.
cool. I'm gonna give it an F. And I was gonna say F plus, but then I decided to look up the other teams who are in this league, and we have the second worst goal scoring in the league in total. So I am going to give it an F.
That means Steven did research.
Yes, absolutely. I
Did
did.
you go to Google and did it tell you the new signing for Nashville SC?
I didn't. It did tell me who scored. We only have one more goal for than New England.
Right.
So I'm gonna go with an F. Look, I do think there are some bright spots when it came to players like Sam Surge contributing. I think Alex Mawil did a lot better offensively than any of us would even request him to do in the position that he was put in. But there just has to be better production. There has to be. You cannot be scoring 37 goals in, this amount of games and expect to move forward. Especially if your defense is also going to play as poorly as they did. So there has to be more production. I don't necessarily think the plan was not there. I just think there was a lot of chances missed. And you can't do that because this is what happens. Hani's got to have a better season next year. Things have to work out way better next year offensively than they did this year. It just is what it is. So I'm going with an F.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Clay.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think like this is one where you could easily grade on a curve. Like I think if you go by what you expect out of Nashville, like what you expect out of Hani Mukhtar, especially, expect out of a team spending its assets the way that Nashville spent its assets, I think an F is a really arguable answer. But like with Surge actually having a good season, Nashville getting production out of a DP, of not named Hani Mukhtar, but getting less production out of Hani Mukhtar, of course, and finding ways to score goals that don't involve Hani. I mean, Hani wasn't involved in any of the 3 goals over the weekend. Like that's where I'm like, I'm going to give that a C. I think that's the reason I felt that way. But I think if you like, big picture, like pull it out, like what we expect Nashville to do offensively, like they completely failed on that front.
I'm closer to Clay than I am to Steven. I got a C minus for the attack, and simply because I think they are more. I think they were the most affected by the stuff. The attackers were the most affected by the stuff happening behind them. I think when you are looking at times where the attacker scored twice, 3 times, and still lost the game, there's a couple of moments like that. There were times where they didn't score at all, but look, you gotta kind of grade them on a curve, like Clay said, because this attack was used to scoring once and generally it being enough. Maybe twice would definitely seal the deal for Nashville SC. To where against DC United, they scored 3 times at home. They were winning 3-1 and still lost the game. So I find maybe this is biased just because they're attackers and they get to score goals, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit more than the rest of the team because, like Clay said, I think there was some just positive moments, especially from Sam Surridge, who I do think can do better and can be better. And Hani Mukhtar has carried this team on his back for every single season except maybe 2020. I mean, I don't know how many times you're going to expect him to come in and have 28, 29 goal contributions in a season. I mean, somebody else has got to step up. I don't see this as a Hani Mukhtar problem. I see this as a Nashville SC problem.
And I do think there are some very encouraging things that we've seen from Hani towards the end of the season.
Yes.
I think that we actually saw him withdrawn a little bit from the attack, which we hadn't seen him played in that role, since 2020. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing yet. That's to be determined. But we saw that happen a few times. We saw him actually put in a few good corners, which he hadn't really done in a while. We saw him score off a free kick, which he hadn't done in a couple years. So there's some things, and those point to confidence. Like those seem like confidence things. And so we saw a Hani that was not confident, for a good chunk of the season. And in the last home game, he scores, he's kissing the badge, he scored a free kick towards the end of the season. Like these are the things that we used to expect out of him. And so I'm really excited about where he's going next year. Like if he recaptures what made Nashville fans fall in love with him.
All right. So I do, just because of the fact that we have three different staffs to cover when it comes to this team. Normally we just have to cover just the one coaching staff, but they're all kind of divvied up pretty evenly when it comes to time being associated with them. So we do want to go through them. We'll have to cover them a little bit quicker in this way. Let's start off with Gary Smith when it comes to his staff and how they did for the season. Is this just the trend where I just go first every single time?
Yep.
Okay, sweet. So for Gary Smith and his staff on the season, I'm gonna go with an F, and that is for fired. Because that's what happened to Gary Smith. I love you, Gary Smith, always will. But yeah, that's an F.
So for me, I put a C minus. I actually put a C to start with and kind of knocked it down. I don't think Gary Smith did anything other than what he had been doing for the last 4 years. And Nashville all of a sudden realizing that they want to change. When you look at his 2024 numbers, they were slightly below what he had done before. And he would have gotten Nashville back on track and they would have made the playoffs. And I would bet any amount of money that would have happened in this hypothetical world where he didn't get fired. So for me, I see nothing that Gary Smith did in 2024 that he hadn't done in every single year he's been with Nashville SC. And I just see Nashville changing their mind, which is fine if they want to change their mind, but that's not Gary Smith's fault, which is why I'll just go ahead and live change it to C because it's average. He did the exact same thing he's always done. And Nashville just decided that they don't want that anymore.
Yeah, I think I stuck with C too. I think a lot of the stuff around Gary, a lot of it had to do with the end of last year. I think that people's feelings towards Gary Smith were drawing more on the end of last year than on this year, because I think unlike the end of last year, which I think was an unexplainable collapse that was a problem, I think the stuff this year you can point to and say, oh, well, there's some injuries there. Oh, well, like he didn't have Walker Zimmerman for this. There's international duty for that. And we've seen him get out of funks. Like we've seen the team rebound from a bad run of games. And I honestly think, and I said it on this show when it happened, I think that they decided to get rid of him and they wanted to get rid of him before he could, get over that hump. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you decide you want to move on from a coach, that's when you move on. Like that's what you should do. And so I'm not saying this as a way to like relitigate the past. I'm just saying like that's what I think happened from the outside. And I think that this team probably would have ultimately made the playoffs. Would they turn over to Nashville 2.0? I do not believe they would have. And I think that provided that this is successful, that was the right decision. But if this whole like Mike Jacobs Nashville 2.0 with Callahan doesn't work, then I think that decision will be looked back at as an omen of things to come. And so I gave it a C. I don't think he did anything that he hadn't done previously. Nashville pulled the trigger. I think they would have made the playoffs if he was still there. But totally understandable decision given the context. And so no issues whatsoever. Average.
Um, okay, Roomba and his staff as well. Nashville 1.5, as I would say, as Roomba had to take over for a little bit as they were moving over to find a new coach, which then took them way longer than it should have to, but here we are. I'm gonna give Roomba some props here. I'm gonna give Roomba a D minus in terms of all things. I think his win percentage was, I'm not sure. Was it over 50%, Roomba's?
No. No.
All right, sorry. Sorry, Roomba.
Now, where did you get that from?
I'm gonna live
He
change.
coached 13 games. I think he had 3 or 4 wins at most. But
All
yeah.
right. Sorry, Roomba. I gotta stick with it. I'm gonna live change to an F here. As well.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, so I should do my research there, but Roomba was put in the worst position ever. I'm glad he's still a part of the staff and what he needs to be doing. Roomba was responsible for bringing in some of the youth players into the squad, which I think was definitely necessary for this kind of start off in the Nashville way. Yeah, I'm gonna go with an F, but I would add a smiley face after I wrote down this F.
This is the highest grade I'm giving anybody on this today's episode, and it's Roomba Mentali and his staff. I'm giving them B plus, simply because they did what they can. And no, he shouldn't have been the interim head coach, and he shouldn't have been interim head coach for 13 MLS games. That is absolutely ridiculous. That is mismanagement, I think, from Nashville SC for a season they claimed that they wanted to still continue to be. To be competitive, and I don't know why we would blame Roomba Muntali for that. I think he was put in a position like that. His staff did their best. He did his best, and to be fair, it worked out for a little bit. But then that ran out, which is what we've seen with other interim coaches. Yeah, I think there was no point that he was actually gonna get this job, and I just think he was, an experience that I don't think he enjoyed very much, but he still did the job and did his best. And for that reason, I'm giving him B plus, him and his staff.
I mean, I gave a C minus. It really doesn't have a whole lot to do with him. I think like I felt like he was stuck in a situation where he didn't know what Nashville wanted to do. Did they want to turn it over to youth, or did they want to try and make the playoffs? And I don't think that you could figure out what they wanted to do by the way that his teams were selected. Because I think some weeks you look at that and you're like, all right, so they're trying to do something. I think some weeks you look at that, it's like, all right, they're trying to bleed new players. And I don't think that you could figure out week to week what they were trying to do. And that's not really on him. That's clearly coming from above him. He has a relationship with Mike that dates back to before Nashville SC was in MLS, before they were in a professional club even. And so I gave a C minus, but it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with him. It's like, if you want to do youth players, let's do youth players. If you want to try and win now, which is what the team said they wanted to try when they got rid of Gary, then you do that. But it seemed like the team didn't seem like it had much of an identity on either side of those things when he was managing. I don't know how much of that has to do with him. So I guess he.
And for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and move on to BJ Callahan and the staff. Steven, I'm assuming you're giving him an F.
Yes.
Okay.
DC United. That's all I got. That's like, I'm hoping things change. I have optimism for the season coming up, but DC United is unacceptable, and that's also from a coaching standpoint. That's an F.
Thank you, Steven, for your opinion. I'm gonna go ahead. So what I had on here, I'm gonna actually change it right now live to C plus. I think there was a lot of good to come out of BJ Callahan. I think his process is in the right place, and focus on this word, process. His process will lead to results eventually. I think if implemented right, if given the right tools to implement. I don't think he had the right tools to implement. I don't think the players were able to implement even when he did even when the point across, I think every single player knew exactly what to do, just couldn't do it at times. And that's eventually what caused the sort of downfall, I guess, of Nashville SC, all things considered. But I think for him, I wouldn't be shocked if I saw a couple more hires within his staff that are his guys, like Michael, right? I think that's his name. Michael Bello. When we look at Kosuke Kimura and Matt Pickens, these are guys who've been with Nashville since the USL days. They were Gary Smith hires. They might, and Ruben Muntali as well, who was a Mike Jacob hire. They might still be in the staff. I'm not saying they won't be, but I wouldn't be surprised if another assistant joins BJ Callahan. I think to implement his process, to implement this mentality, he has to make sure that every single person in the club believes in it and is willing to do the work for it. And I don't think you can do that halfway through the season with just a couple games of League Cup and like 10 MLS games. I don't think that's possible. And for that reason, I am giving him a C plus because I see where he's trying to accomplish. Whether or not he can accomplish it, I do believe that he needs a full season with a preseason and everything like that, which is, by the way, something Sam Surridge said. He said he's most looking forward to preseason with BJ Callahan because he said that, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that having preseason with the coach implementing his ideas without having like the pressure of the season is going to help the team build and all that. So I think a preseason with BJ Callahan is going to do this team a whole lot of favor, and I think soon Nashville SC will start to reap those benefits of hiring a coach with a process like his.
Uh, Honestly, I think I was a little kind. I put C. I think if you were just judging off of the results on the field and like just generally managing off basis of the results and the mistakes that Nashville is making, some of which were managerial related, I think you'd have to go lower. But the reason why I'm giving C is because I'm not really giving C. I'm giving incomplete. If he learned from his mistakes this season, then it's absolutely worth it and it's a passing grade. Like he's a first year manager, like he's someone who hasn't managed on the senior level for any club. So he's going to have some growing pains, and he got to do those in a season that didn't really matter. At the end of the club said it mattered until it didn't. So like that's the reason why I feel incomplete is right. He does have an open spot on his staff. It is worth noting because Gary Smith wasn't the only one who left us. We also lost Steve Guppy in that. So there would be an open spot on his staff to begin with. I'd be interested in seeing.
He hired Mike Bello and him. So that took over for Guppy and
Oh, okay.
Gary. Yeah.
There was also
would be an open spot. Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking of the other guy who was with there before Guppy as well, but I can't remember his name. But he left before the season started, so he's been gone for a minute. Either way, going back to what I was saying, I wouldn't be surprised to see Pickens back. Obviously, he's done well with at least one goalkeeper in Joe Willis. Kimura also came from the youth academy to the senior squad, so they're kind of ingrained in Nashville a little bit more. But with BJ specifically, if they take the principles that they worked on this season towards the end of the season and pass them forward successfully into preseason and into next year, you come back and you say it's an A or a B or whatever. But if, and this is very real possibility, if he goes into next year and isn't successful, which does happen, like he's not been a head coach before, then you can come back and look at this and say, well, there were some signs that there might be some issues going forward. So that's the reason I settled on a C.
And last but not least, we have the overall just front office and the staff there. Mike Jacobs being kind of the head of that. And then just the front managerial staff that's kind of in charge of, kind of the overall stuff. I'm excited personally to hear the both of you because I personally think you both are scrubs and think you're giving this way too high of a rating for what you did. I'm gonna go with 3 Fs. I think if I could give out more Fs, if I had a piece of paper with all the grades on this, I would just keep stamping F. I understand there are some unfortunate things that did happen throughout the season when it came to injuries and plans and all of that, but this is what has been being built for 3 to 4 years. What we've been told is going to be some excellent performance in team performance that just didn't happen. and it's just a failure on all fronts on my end when it comes to the front of office staff. And good luck for the next season of getting it together, because there's not a lot of wiggle room, unfortunately, even though there does need to be a rebuild.
I think that's fair. That's fair. And I and just to come out and say this, the grade here is D minus for me and for Clay, actually. And I'll let Clay answer for his. But I will say for me, I think the most disappointing part is maybe just losing a little bit of what the plan is. And there could well be a plan that is private to Mike Jacobs and his staff that's never been made public to media or to the fans. And that could be a possibility. And he could be a mastermind who's about to pull it all together next season. Possibility. There's also a possibility that somewhere along there, the plot was lost and and things got kind of out of hand. When you look at Nashville saying that they are a Moneyball approach, where every dollar matters and how every dollar is spent matters, and then Nashville becoming the fourth highest salary in the league, something doesn't add up. And when Nashville became the fourth highest selling salary, they had their worst season. Something is not adding up. Then when you have that bad season, you fire a coach halfway through. Again, nothing wrong with that. Sure, you made up your mind. I don't see why that decision couldn't have happened before 2024 started. I really don't know what Gary Smith did in the beginning of 2024 to solidify the decision to get rid of him. I think he did the exact same thing. I mean, the problems were the same. The good performances were the same and the bad performances were the same. So all that said, I think there's just a bit of mismanagement here. I think not every signing is going to be a hit. And look, not every signing ever for any team is going to be a hit. But sometimes you're going to need a couple more hits than busts. And I want to give them a huge credit for Jacob Schaffelberg, Lucas McNaughton, Jonathan Perez is looking like a really, really good signing. These are the signing this staff excels at. Is the signing of the underrated MLS sort of player. Everything else has been a miss pretty much. Sean Davis, unfortunately, things haven't worked out for him in Nashville. He's an incredible guy, but I think him and Jacobs and everybody around will agree that things haven't gone to plan with him. When you look at giving Jack Mayer $800,000 a year, more than a lot of center backs in this league. Again, Jack Mayer had a really good season, but that just seems like no one else in MLS would have given him that contract. Just based on what I'm seeing. I could be wrong, but that's, again, this is based on what I'm seeing from my end. I think he had to make Walker Zimmerman a DP. I don't think there's much room to keep Walker without being a DP. So I don't want to harp on that. But when you look at this roster, you're right, Steven. There's very little movement. There are only 4 players out of contract, couple of options here and there. But overall, I think they put themselves in this all or nothing win now mode, and they didn't win now. So now what? That's really what it comes down to.
So originally I had this at a D minus, and I've actually moved it to an F. Largely, from dollars and cents standpoint, you can't spend that much money and not make the playoffs. End up. The reason why I was kind of leaning towards just barely
okay,
passing,
Chicago, let's calm down there.
But largely, like, the reason why I was giving them barely passing was because they actually did all right getting players in this year. I think that their signings this year were a market improvement over some of the more recent years. I think the guys they brought in were good players that fit, certainly fit in a way that they didn't end up playing by the end of the year. But like, I think there were some pretty shrewd gets. I mean, Perez is a good get. I think Sedic is a good value for what you paid for him. I think
Back.
Surge now looks like a DP player that wasn't signed this year, but you know what I'm saying with that. I think that Drew Yearwood, at times this season looked like a really good signing that fit. And so, and none of these cost a ton of money. Boyd looked like perfect fit at certain points this season. So like, I was really pretty happy with the signings, but I think what they were missing, and this is something that Nashville has had in the past, and I think what they were missing is when it came to these roster decisions, they weren't as ruthless as they used to be. When they got rid of Dave Romney, they said, we have Jack Mayer. Mayer can play that. Let's make that money off Romney and move on. Like when the Alistair thing didn't totally work out, but they were like, we can maximize Alistair's value now. So let's do that so we don't have to pay him and then get Shaq Moore in, who will be here for longer. Like that's ruthless decision making that gets you down the line. But now you look at this roster. You gave Jack Mayer a big raise after one season. You're paying Randall Leal to play less than what do you play, like 70 minutes this year?
Yeah,
You're paying him like $1 million. You're paying Sean Davis $1 million. They cut Dax McCarty last year. You know what I mean? Like who would have cost a third of that. Like that's the type of ruthless decision making that they were making at times over the years. And then where was it this year? And so you can't turn around and say that this is a win now roster and then decide to go with an interim manager for 13 games. Like the way there's just some intellectual inconsistency going on from what we've seen in years past to this year specifically. And that's the part that makes me really uncomfortable with the direction. Now, I think that Mike can get himself out of this. I think that he's shown that he can build a team that can be competitive in MLS. And truthfully, I kind of think he's earned the right to. In the same way, I thought Gary Smith earned the right to see if he could get out of the funk that they were in. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. I think that Mike's earned the right to see if he can get out of this mess. I think he's got enough on credit so that he'll get this offseason to build up. But he is absolutely, unquestionably on the hot seat going into next season. And if Nashville is anywhere close, they need to be comfortably in the playoffs. If they're anywhere close to where they are right now, I think John Ingram has to turn around and go, what am I spending my money on?
Yeah. And I think that would be a very fair thing from the owner to look at the general manager and say, where's this plan going? Because it's not showing results. And I think the ruthlessness point is really, really good, Clay, because it seems like they're picking and choosing when to be ruthless, which you can't do. You just have to go and do your business as also Nashville SC has never in their history exercised paying off someone for like terminating their contract by paying them off.
Sort of. Ake Loba.
They loaned him out though.
Yeah, but it was mutual consent by the end.
Yeah, I guess that counts. But regardless, they get two payout a year now, starting next season, I believe. So
I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Davis is one of those.
It's either that or contract. Trade somewhere. But yeah, we'll talk about roster decisions another time. So I don't want to take more of today's episode, but I do. This is a pretty heavy episode, so maybe this is a good point to end. But yeah, I think for Mike and the technical staff, I think they have a lot of work to do, and I would be shocked if that work hadn't already started pretty much, months ago. For BJ, he's gonna join in this process. He said, like now this week, he said the evaluation starts this week. The team has a week off, but then they're gonna come back to training actually, even though there isn't a game. And there's going to be evaluation as well for the team. So for BJ, he's new to this process, but I feel like Mike and his staff have already started this process, and I'll be shocked if some decisions haven't already been made. It's just we're probably not going to hear about them for a little bit longer.
Anything else that we need to cover? I think that's the entire team plus the front office. Personally, I think I gave the best report card out of the both of you. Just throwing that out there. I'm pretty happy with my decisions and report card.
Steven,
Anything else we want to talk about?
On the basis of everything we know about everyone on this, you're the one I least trust with the report card.
That's fair. Touche.
No comment. One thing I'll say before we wrap up, the U.S. women's national team will be playing at Geodis Park on October 27th. That is next Sunday. So get your tickets. It seems like there are a lot of tickets available, so go get your tickets. They're playing against Iceland in an international friendly. You'll get a chance to see some gold medalists. You get the chance to see maybe some World Cup winners even. Emma Hayes is still somewhat new, I guess, in this role, but she's been able to kind of get this team back to the heights that they belong in. They are also playing Iceland in Q2 Stadium in Austin 3 days before that. So October 24th in Austin, and then October 27th in Geodis Park, and then October 30th they're playing Argentina at Louisville at Lynn Family Stadium. So all things considered, watch that because it's the women's international break.
Hey, and learn something about Iceland that doesn't involve Gylfi Sigurdsson or Mighty Ducks 2.
Yeah, Iceland is a country that upset England pretty heavily in Euro 2016. And if you don't know about that story, please go look up the highlights because it's like a country of like 12 people and they did really well and even qualified for our World Cup. So it's a pretty amazing story.
I will
Steven has
say,
a bootleg Iceland jersey.
any other random MLS stuff that we want to talk about? Oh, I do want to mention one thing. At least we, even if we did have our own playoff match, we could actually host it and not play it at somebody else's stadium because bike racing is scheduled for there. Supercross racing is scheduled for there, so the team cannot play their opening MLS playoff match in Vancouver. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, I think the West is a lot more exciting than the East in terms of the playoffs. I think a lot of the East is kind of decided already. My favorite Eastern Conference storyline here is Joseph Martinez redemption arc, where he just like goes to his former teams and wins. Because Montreal is like a bunch of children and like Joseph Martinez there. So it's a pretty fun team. I think they kind of struck gold towards the end of the season, and they're playing at home against Atlanta in the playing match. And then if they win, they'll go on obviously to play Inter Miami, which is another Joseph Martinez former team. And I think it would be amazing to see him score against both of those teams, and it would be really fun storyline to follow. But yeah, the West is a lot more exciting.
I think the only real storyline for me is what are we going to see from Messi going into the playoffs? I mean, that's such a basic storyline that someone who would be annoyed, I'd be annoyed at that story last year, but I do think like, we have the greatest player in the history of the sport playing in MLS, and Miami is coming off a record-setting season. And while it's annoying because they joined the league the same time as Nashville did, but just managed to get Messi to play for them. At the same time, I am interested in seeing, because if they turn around and win MLS Cup, it's arguably the greatest season in the history of the league. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out.
Agreed. Y'all, thank you everybody so much again for listening to the show. We appreciate it. We are going to take a break next week. This was a heavy episode anyway, so I feel like we can take a break next week. We gave you all the content you possibly could want for the next couple weeks. We'll be back in a few weeks, of course, to start talking a little bit more about those roster and offseason decisions. I don't have a prediction.
Instead of predicting, please keep an eye out on Broadway Sports Media. I have a bunch of articles coming out, as well as the rest of the Broadway crew. We're doing reports cards per player. So we did it by position here. We're doing it. Each player is going to get one. So follow along for those. We also have a bunch of articles coming out from there. So please read some of those. Support my work.
Your fan survey too.
And the fan survey, we actually just sent that out this morning. So at Valer Shabila, follow my work, please, on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. I really appreciate all the support from this year. And for us on the show here, I think I speak for everyone. I say we really do appreciate those on Patreon. You guys are amazing. And even those who listen who aren't on Patreon, we like you, but we would like you more, a little bit more, if you were to join the Patreon.
Yeah, this is a big year for Pharma Soccer, actually. It may not have been a big year for the team. This is a big year for Pharma Soccer.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to apologize for making Valer and Steven think I was about to step away from the podcast at the start of this episode. I didn't mean to do that, but I do want to shout out to everyone who listened, everyone who says that they listen every week. We got some really fun interact. Those are the best interactions that we have when people tell us they listen in every week, and it makes us feel like we're not talking to a wall. Because sometimes on these shows, especially when you've maybe haven't won in 10 games, it feels like you're just talking to a wall. And so, letting us know that you guys tune in every week is really great, and we don't take any of it for granted. We're the longest running show in this city, and the reason for that is because you guys listen, and we are very excited for hopefully a much more enjoyable season next year.
Yeah, thank you again so much listening to the show. Appreciate it. Like I said, we'll be back here in a little bit. In a couple weeks, we'll talk to you then. Thank you again so much. Appreciate it.